Hello, everyone. My name is Olha Boyko. I'm a coordinator of Climate Action Network Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia. And we're welcoming you at the first webinar of the series of three. The next ones will happen in 2 days and in 4 days. All of them are going to be related to Conference of Parties number 29, COP29, that will happen in Baku later this autumn. And my role today is to open up this maybe a new topic for some of you, and maybe an event where you are seeing yourself this year for the first time. This webinar, and in general, the series of webinars, is for everybody who is interested. So it is not going to be too technical or too long. So in case you are already an expert in UNFCCC negotiations and you are following some specific topics already, I would suggest staying and seeing. Maybe you can still find like an interesting detail for you, but also understand that this is mainly for people who have never been to COP or have only discovered that such process is taking place on the international level. So let's start, and we will start with, I can introduce myself a bit more in more details because I have been in the climate movement for soon to be 10 years. And over this time, I have done different things. So I've been with the Climate Action Network for 8 years now. And out of those 8 years, most of the time I was following the climate policies in the Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asian countries. I was also a communicator at the beginning. And I worked with a Ukrainian NGO called EECCA, and as well was on the board and also coordinated the Ukrainian Climate Network, which is kind of a bit like CAN, but on the national level, which is a network of civil society organizations. And to talk about COP, I have been to 5 of them on the ground, offline, since 2015. And of course, the ones that I missed, I followed online. The plan for today is quite straightforward. So we're gonna go through what is COP, how actually people can take part, and why they should be worried and interested about the topic, and a bit about this year context. But really just a little bit, because my colleagues will then talk a little bit more about it in the next webinars. Okay, so there's certain abbreviations that you're gonna meet over the presentation, and there will be some more as well, but they will be explained. But the main ones that you have to remember and know is, of course, the COP, Conference of the Parties, the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the NCQG, which is especially important for this year because this is about finance. So this means the new collective quantified goal. And here goes my first question. You will see this kind of messages popping up a couple of times during the presentation. So if COP is the conference of the parties, so the parties come to this conference, who are actually those parties? What are we talking about? Like, who are those parties that gather at the conference? And I would suggest using chat for that. I think it's easier than the question and answer. There's one answer so far. Please type in, what do you think? Who are the parties of the COP? Countries, the member countries, countries and people attending this conference. Paris Agreement, countries. Great. Okay. So basically, yes, the governments, countries, climate groups. You are all correct, more or less, because definitely the parties are the representatives of the countries who ratified and signed this United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So this is how it works. Fun thing is that there's other COPs. So we're talking about this Conference of Parties to this convention. So the countries that actually signed this convention are gathering. While there are other COPs, so other conferences of parties, for example, to the Convention on fight with desertification or biodiversity as well. So depending on which convention was signed, then the parties that signed this convention gather and discuss like how to do an action plan within this convention. Great, thank you for being active. And just a little bit deeper dive into UNFCCC. This is the slide with the most text, so forgive me. But basically what's important to know is the history behind the UNFCCC. It's relatively old, but also to me, it seems like it's not that old because only in the end of, only in the 90s that all of the countries actually agreed that the climate change was a serious problem that needed to be like solved on the international level with like countries coming together. So it was officially on paper in 1992. And then of course this framework convention, which means that it's kind of broad, right? The framework means that it's some principles, it's kind of setting the aim, a vision that we want to work on solving the climate crisis, and that the climate crisis is actually caused by humans, so anthropogenic interference. And all of these kind of general commitments were put into the framework convention. And then, of course, it served as the basis for a bit more detailed agreements where they were explored new ways of how countries can actually solve this issue. So the 1992 convention was more of a declaration that there is an issue that needs to be solved. And then since then, for 30 years, the countries are trying to find ways that actually work to solve this issue. And as you can imagine, this is a huge task. So the convention was ratified by almost 200 states that actually agreed also to not just kind of say that climate change is an issue, but also report on their progress. And for example, they do it through the national communications on climate change every couple of years. And there is a secretariat, so there is a team of people working under UNFCCC that supports the work of the UNFCCC, and these are the people who are basically staff of the UN, and they are not representing a country, but they help this whole process to actually happen. And then during COP, the decisions are made. So during the year, there's smaller negotiations, there's meetings. So your country delegation is not waiting for the whole year to just come to COP and decide everything. They are actually going to different meetings during the year, trying to prepare for making a decision during COP. Yeah, so I hope that's clear. And there's a bit of a timeline for you also to put things together, but I hope that's now it's more or less clear. There's, interestingly, the first COP, so after the Framework Convention was created and signed, first COP happened in Berlin. It's very strange to see COP with just one number together, because my first COP was 21 already. But yeah, this was in 1995, and already there, a lot of the non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations, had their meetings and prepared joint positions. So it was already not just a governmental conference, it was a multi-stakeholder conference. And then, of course, there were a couple of important agreements passed over the years where a country tried to create new mechanisms for actually dealing with climate change. For example, Kyoto Protocol, or then the Paris Agreement that started working after Kyoto Protocol. It kind of worked for 20 years. Countries tried out different mechanisms, learned their lessons, and tried to do something better. Okay. And this slide I like very much because it is very simple, but very, it shows so much. because what was actually in the UNFCCC, so in the Framework Convention, is that the greenhouse gas emissions are rising and we need to do something about it because it is a serious issue. And I think since then, people were looking at the actions that we did and trying to understand whether they are actually effective and whether the whole global conference is effective as a format. But of course, the issue is not that the people cannot agree, which is also a challenge to make 197 countries agree on something, on one thing. But also it is very hard challenge because of how the world is built right now. So on the top, you can see what causes most greenhouse gas emissions. And it's not a surprise, I hope, it's the fossil fuels, burning of fossil fuels. It's the coal, it's the natural gas and oil. And then, of course, at the bottom, you can see the energy supply. So what actually gives us food and heat and electricity and access to some medical services and transport and so many other things, access to education. The energy is also fossil fuels. So this was not created in one day, of course. We had more than 100 years of industrialization, of exploration of fossil fuels, which is still ongoing. And this is the biggest challenge that we actually have to deal with, I think, as humanity, because imagine how many systems we would need to change in order to decrease these three colors, the first, the second, and the third, and make them smaller, because these are the ones that actually are causing the climate change. This is just to put things into perspective and say that it is a very big challenge. And it does need the efforts of as many people and stakeholders as possible. So who are actually those stakeholders? The countries that are coming are not negotiating on their own. So it's not like more than 100 countries are just speaking one after another. They try to cooperate. And it was actually a rule that they should form coalitions within the negotiations. So now there's all kinds of coalitions and country groups. Some of them are united by geography. Some of them are united by economy. So for example, least developed countries. Some of them are united by certain geographical characteristics, like the small island states, for example. And of course, politically, like European Union. And just for you to understand how big this map is, I put this slide on, and you can click on the link down here later and study it a bit more, where you can see the crossing of different groups where the countries take part. So it's some of them are mentioned, but actually you can see all of the acronyms down here as well. And if you really want to why it's important to understand that, because if you want to influence decisions made at COP, you really need to understand who actually makes them. And of course, every party is taking part in making that decision, because the decisions are made by consensus. That means that all of the parties should agree, but they do not act on their own. So there's always interests combined within different country groups, and they talk to each other constantly every day. And you need to understand what are the interests of specific country groups, not just specific countries. And once you understand that, it will be easier to understand, for example, why it's so hard to make certain decisions, because it is hard to agree in the world in general on such hard topics as changing energy systems, for example, as you've seen from previous slide. But who else is present? There's actually other badges, we say, because you can see here on the right, there's like little badges that people have after they register and if they are coming to the conference. So you can have the party badge. Party is, as we know now, is the country delegations. Then there's the UN organizations, as I was saying, is the ones that are like kind of helping the event itself. And then there's international, there's the non-governmental organizations and the media. And the observers, the yellow badge is the one that we are most familiar with in Cannes, because this is the badge that is given to non-governmental organizations, to the NGOs. And the best part about it is that you can actually share a badge with a colleague, not in terms of like a metro card, but actually you can give a quota that was given to your organization by UNFCCC to someone else from the civil society, and they can actually participate in the conference, for example, if you cannot do it, or if you have more than you need. For the media, it's also a very good badge. And in case there's media representatives in here, or even you are not registered as a media, but maybe you are a blogger and you have written about climate change and energy issues, you can still apply for a press badge. And it will actually give you a bit of more access even than to the Observer NGO badge. Because you will have your press room where you can write articles calmly, and even conduct interviews and record podcasts. So there's this other group, sorry for typos on this slide. There's this other group that takes part and is actually very important to cover the negotiations. It's the media. But as we have also cases in our region where the media is actually based in, is registered as an NGO, then they would kindly say that you should register as an NGO in the UNFCCC. So you should get this observer badge instead and not a media badge. Yeah, and then there's a bit of details. There's like some special badges that the country delegations can give people that work with them, but maybe they are not part of the government. For example, Party Overflow is like an extra badge from the party. And some of the civil society organizations actually have those connections with delegations and have those kinds of badges. And last thing on who takes part in COPs is the constituencies. So the constituencies are actually the groupings between those different observers. So there's now close to 4,000 observers registered, I think. It has been increasing since 1995, and they decided to group themselves as well into, as you can see, either topical, like thematic groups, or the kind of the type of field that they represent. So for example, farmers, or then there's youth NGOs, right? Yango, you will hear it probably if you go to COP, Yango, but also maybe Ringo is the scientist and like research, as you can see, NGOs. There's also the business and industry NGOs, indigenous peoples, trade unions, and as you can see, the biggest group is the environmental NGOs, which makes sense. And this is also where Ken is part of. There's women and gender. There's actually disability as well somewhere, but it's not included here for some reason. But yes, in between those constituencies, of course, people can kind of go to different meetings and not just stick to one constituency, but it is a very good tool to understand like how climate change is connecting so many different stakeholders and how it is connected to every field of our life. So in case you're an NGO and you want to get accredited with the UNFCCC, you can actually join some of these constituencies, and they meet every day during COP, and they follow the negotiations from the perspective, with the lens that is important for them. So for example, the women and gender constituency will be looking at whether the topics of gender equality are actually covered in the negotiations. And then you will ask how to register. And sometimes I get this question of like, where is the registration link or form to go to COP? So if this is the first time that you're considering coming and you didn't hear a lot about COP before, there is no registration link. So it's short answer is that it's not that easy because you need to be part of some group, right? So as I was saying, if you're a media, you can get a media badge. But if you're an NGO, actually the NGO, the registered organization, needs to apply for accreditation. And it takes around 1 year, sometimes more, for them to actually confirm that you are now in the database and that your NGO basically can get a badge with your name on it. So there will be a name out here. So name of your NGO will be on the badge. But in order to do this, you need some time. That's why a lot of colleagues are actually asking for help from other colleagues that are already accredited. But it is good to have your own organization's badge for representation and maybe to help other colleagues as well. You can ask, I hope my colleague Nugzar will talk about this on Wednesday, the benefits of being actually in this accredited list. But in case you want to do it actually, or you are a media or a blogger, I invite you to watch our webinar of CAN EECCA. It's available in English and in Russian on our YouTube channel. And we go step by step on how to actually do it, if you decide to do it. And now a bit more about our role at COP, but just in general, kind of the parallel history, right? Because the history of the UNFCCC you now understand, and I just wanted to include what was happening in the civil society at the same time. So actually, there's been even first meetings of like collective meetings of different civil society organizations already in 1989. And they were discussing, the climate change and how to actually cooperate and work on solutions. And then after the UNFCCC, after the Framework Convention, they formulated some strategic goals to exchange information, to propose solutions, and to cooperate with each other. And at the first COP in Berlin, as I was saying, there was already a strategic meeting held. And since then, the Climate Action Network was actually present at every single COP. So COP 1, 2nd, 3rd, etc., until 29 this year as well, and in the next years. There's also a format, sort of a show that happens during COP every evening, organized by the civil society organizations. When they see that the negotiations on climate don't actually go anywhere, and maybe they're stuck a bit, and some countries are not willing to propose good solutions, effective solutions, then these countries can be nominated for the so-called Fossil of the Day, which is like an anti-award to the countries that are not doing enough during that negotiation day. So we're following the negotiations very closely. And if we see that there's someone blocking some good decision, then we can call them out and kind of say that, that they need to agree on better decisions. And in 2008, our regional CAN node appeared, which covers Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia. So the second part is about you. It's about how you can actually take part and maybe why you would want to take part in COP. But if you came to this webinar, I'm sure you do not ask yourself the why question so much, but actually even people who are coming to COP every year for many years, they sometimes are asking them if it's worth it, if it's bringing us the results that we want, and if it's the best format to actually make those decisions. So of course, and this is the director of CAN International here, speaking at COP 2 years ago, just to explain the pictures. Of course, I don't think that it's that hard to talk to people about climate change anymore. And personally, I see much less skepticism over the past years. So it was a bit harder 5-10 years ago to explain to people why we need to do something about climate change and, for example, change our consuming habits on the systemic level, and change the energy sources that we use and the way we do agriculture and so many things, because they maybe felt fine. Maybe they did not see the results of climate change every day. And I'm mostly talking about our geography, so Eastern Europe, Caucasus, Central Asia. Because of course, if you've asked the citizens of small island states, they would have told you 20 years ago that the problem is there, because the sea level was rising for them and they noticed it. But of course, now, unfortunately, climate change affects us every day. And on some days, it might seem like everything is normal and nothing horrible is going on. But then we have heat waves, like the one we had this July, or we have the droughts that make the farmers actually go into debt, and some even end their lives because of the loss of the crops, and the financial problems that come with it for their family and communities. We have floods in places that we didn't have them before, because basically the system is becoming destabilized and there's more extreme weather events now, and they are happening more often than before. And of course, for Caucasus and for Central Asia, the water scarcity and the water issue is also very close to home, and something that especially people living in the villages have noticed for a long time already. And of course, then if we see that this is all happening and it's affecting us personally, it's affecting our health, our well-being and financial status, how do we solve it? But as we saw, the issue is not that, I don't know, people's habits just caused it, for example, something we do in our houses every day. The consuming of energy affects it, but there's also industries, for example. And the problem is so global overall that it does require a global platform for solutions. And this is where COP actually becomes useful. Because during the conference, you can see what are the trends. So what are the new arising topics in which countries are investing their attention, their resources. It also shows you the state of the world to some extent. So who is actually ready to do something and who is only talking about it. It is a meeting place for all stakeholders of different levels. I have heard it from my colleagues a lot that it's sometimes hard to actually meet with their own decision makers in their countries, because they're always busy, they're like in their cabinets, and it's hard to meet them. But then during COP, they are in the same space with you, in the same corridors. And sometimes you can actually build connections like this and show that you are also on the same platform, present as they are. And it's of course also a meeting place for all the world. So not just the stakeholders from your country, but from any country of the world, they are going to be there. And of course, it is a spotlight on issues of climate change. I meant in media and overall. So there's a spike in articles about climate change during COP season, so to say. And in general, it's easier to talk to people about this issue when some big event related to this issue is going on at the same time. So we also need to use it like this. But I couldn't have missed the opportunity to actually add that the main work is actually done in between COPs. So it's very important to stay interested, like you are right now, also after COP, whatever COP that might be, and before the next one and during the year, because COP is just a flashlight, right? So it's just a moment that shows what we can do together and what we cannot do. But then there's so much time in between that we need to use as well. And coming to a personal story a little bit, I was first at COP in Paris, COP21. Actually, a very important one, as I discovered, because the Paris Agreement was signed there. And I was 21-year-old. No, I was actually 19. I was actually 19. And I didn't even have accreditation. So you can see here a huge delegation because it wasn't that far away also from Kyiv. And we came with my colleagues from civil society, from different organizations, actually to learn, but also to understand what can we do and what is the world talking about. So what is important? Because we were mostly working on the local level, on national level. And we really wanted to understand, okay, what is happening on the global level. So for me, that first COP, I did not take part in negotiations, and I was mostly meeting people a lot. And the next COP was already the first one where I had my badge. There's also a picture of me. This was in Marrakesh in 2016. I tried to gather some tips, some personal tips that actually helped me not to get lost because I was still a new person in this topic. And what really helped me is first, of course, being surrounded by colleagues, not coming there all on my own, but actually coming with a team or at least someone else who we can discuss before, during, and after. I could ask questions and some suggestions, etc. So, of course, COP is all about cooperation. So my first suggestion, definitely don't go there alone. Find someone who you can discuss with and jointly decide, for example, which events to follow and who to meet, etc. Then I was really open to new knowledge and meeting other activists. I was very interested in the motivation of other people who are coming there and why they are there. What are their goals for the conference? So I even did a bit of interviews, like filming people and taking some notes from them. It really helped me to understand a bit better who is actually around me. So I didn't feel lost in this huge meeting. Of course, I also came with a background on the national issues. So I knew how climate change affected Ukraine and what were the solutions that the civil society was asking for. So it really helps at least to know your background and then to learn about other people's backgrounds. I did had some reading before on the way to the conference, and it really also helps to read some kind of compiled information, something that is put together in one place. We are preparing with CAN EECCA a climate policy overview for the region, so that should also be useful. But in general, any kind of recommendations, overview, your country's position as well, should also help you to prepare and understand what would be the focus. For example, if you read country position, what would be the focus of your delegation during the conference? It's very important to know why you're going there. Even if it's just to learn and to meet the global climate movement, you still need to answer yourself this question, like, why actually do I want to go there? And remember about it. Especially if you're a communicator and you want to write about something, it's super important to understand what is your goal, how much, for example, you want to produce, or how many people you want to meet, or from which countries, from which spheres. And then if you want to write something or you want to get a deeper knowledge on some issue, please choose 1, 2, maximum 3 topics that you want to follow and follow them, because there is tens of parallel events, so maybe like 20, 30 parallel events, like panels happening during the whole period of time. So it is impossible to follow everything. And that's also why it's good to have a team and not being alone, because then you can hear a little bit from other topics that people follow, but you need to understand what is your topic, what is your goal, and what is your role at this conference. And it ideally should be connected to your background and to what you're doing before and after COP in your day-to-day life, in your work. What also helped me is to actually write short summaries. I wrote them somewhere on Facebook with a bit of pictures and like, what have I learned today? Who did I meet today? It's helping a lot, especially then after you come back and you start forgetting all of these details. Then you can come back to your notes and actually remember some insights that you had. And I mean, that's probably obvious, but knowing English helps a lot. But also if you know Spanish or French or German or any other languages that are spoken outside of your country, then of course it creates bridges between you and people from around the world that might be interesting for you. Then I wanted to quickly cover the participation offline and online, because there is a way to actually be at your house, at your computer, and still participate at COP. So let's first talk about online. I have had this experience for a bit, a couple of times, and I cannot say that it doesn't make sense at all to participate online. But it kind of answers to your different needs. So if you're online, you definitely can follow the information flow faster, because as I was saying, there's so many things happening at the same time. And if you are on the ground, running from one room to another, meeting people on the way, someone calls you, you need to answer to your, I don't know, messages on the phone, etc. It's very intense. And then you need to also remember, like, what is your goal for the day and what do you want to do today and which meetings you need to attend. So you're just constantly running. And when you're at home near your computer, you can watch actually so much of what's going on from the articles that people are posting, from the social media that they're posting, and actually from official broadcasting of the UNFCCC. And it's so much easier to then put this information together and understand what happened during the day. Then you can still also give interviews online. So in case you are following your country's negotiations, or you have some topic that you are expert on and you want to know how this topic is covered at COP, you can still connect to the media, even if the press is actually in Baku, for example, and you are not there. They can still call you and you say, oh, I noticed this and this. I heard from this person and I think that the negotiations are going to this direction. So if you're an expert, you can still do interviews online. That's, I think, amazing. And of course, what you can also do is to get like a little bit of taste of the country's positions, because the first 2 days, so in our case, it's 11 and 12 of, no, it's actually 12 and 13 of November, because 11 is an opening day. So there's 2 days of the high-level climate conference. So it's like a part of COP where the presidents, the prime ministers are coming, and they are talking for like 5 to 10 minutes, addressing all of the parties in the name of their country. So from those little speeches, you can actually get a sense of how serious they're taking the climate issue, if they're proposing anything new, because, for example, we follow it for many years, and the country delegations actually use their previous speeches from last year's, and they just add maybe like 1 or 2 sentences, and they reuse it again on the next year. So that's not a good sign, but you can get a kind of a feeling of what is important for the country to say at this space. From those high-level speeches. And actually, when you're there at COP, you probably won't even get into the room. So if you want to listen to those speeches, at least how I did it, I was still somewhere at the computer, but just in the conference, in the space, or like on the floor with my laptop. And I was listening still the online broadcast because it was more available. So you can still follow pretty, like, a lot of information. But of course, if you decide to actually travel and be present offline on the ground, then you have like a physical access to people, right? You can actually meet people either from other countries, other topics, delegations, whoever you can find, and with whomever you can connect. You have this access, they are there. Then something that also people tell me after coming to COP, especially if they work on local level for many years, and then they go to COP and they come back and they say, I didn't expect that it's so huge. So, and then something else that they say is, now I feel like a part of a huge movement of people. I feel like I'm not alone. So I think that's very valuable, and it's very hard to explain. Like if I tell you that there's 30 events happening at the same time, or the square meter is this and that, or there's like 50,000 people, it's really hard to imagine unless you're actually there and you're meeting all of those people. So it might be a bit overwhelming because of the size, but it also gives you this access to seeing how it's actually what's actually going on is going on, and yeah, basically the next point is about making it personal, so you can talk to people, you can understand the struggles a bit better of what they have in their country, how the climate change is affecting their communities. You can share your stories. And I also think it's a very valuable place to exchange this information, not just the kind of scientific perspective and political perspective of what you think your country needs to do in terms of like energy transition, but also personal stories, yeah, from your village, etc. And then, of course, it is also about networking in terms of increasing your social capital, getting more contacts for future cooperations. And this is also what our country's delegations are doing there. So they are not just there to negotiate on the topics under the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC. They are also there to make contacts and to network and to meet other delegations from other countries. This will be the last part, and after that, I think there will be a bit of time still to answer some of your questions. So what is happening this year? Again, it is COP number 29. The dates are known, the place is known, but what was the context in which this was decided, and what is so special about this year's COP? To my opinion is that this COP is actually historical for our region, because this is the first time that this conference is taking place in our region, but not in the EU. So there's groups within the UNFCCC, and one group is called Eastern Europe. And within this group, every 5 years, there needs to be a country that volunteers to host COP. And usually it was Poland a couple of times. And before that, it was, I think, Hungary, maybe like 20 years ago. But it was hosted in Italy or something like that. So outside of the EU, but in our region, it is actually happening for the first time. But we did not actually have enough time to prepare. So it was a very tense and difficult decision to choose this country, this year's host of COP. And usually it is known like more than 1 year before, like maybe even 2 years before the COP happens. We already know which country volunteered to host it. But in this case, we had a bit less than 1 year. So we only discovered that it will be finally Azerbaijan in December last year during COP28. And of course, this is a huge challenge because it makes it harder for the country to prepare. It makes it harder for the civil society to prepare. And there's just less time to do the communication work and to do like all the work required and logistical, etc. So this is a challenge because, for example, the COP30 next year is happening in Brazil, and we knew about it already 1 year before. So COP29 still didn't happen, but the focus is a lot on Brazil already because the country's government is very active, the civil society is very active. They are kind of being a lot of like very present on the media, preparing for the negotiations already. So a lot of the attention is already on the next year's COP. So it is very important for us not to lose this attention that we have on our region for this year. It is also going to be a very important COP in terms of negotiations. So in terms of actually the issues that the delegations are discussing. And here is, if you remember from the first slide about abbreviations, this is the one that was there. It's the new collective quantified goal. And this is basically a sum of money that the countries agree to collect every year for climate action. It used to be $100 billion, and we actually didn't quite achieve it. So every year it was a bit less. Every year it was a bit less, a bit less. But now the time has come to actually review this goal. So we actually understand that we needed much more. And we hope that this year's decision will be taken in Baku and that the new collective quantified goal will be decided and that it will be bigger than the last one. But most importantly is when we see that it actually is being collected. So it's one thing to set a goal, is the other thing to actually set steps that lead you to this goal. And this is why this period in between COPs is also very important. But the decision needs to be made during COP29. It will also be a bit smaller COP in size. I mean, when we say small, it's like 40,000 people still. But last year it was something like 70 or 80 if we take like all people who came for like a day, etc. So it is huge and it has been like growing in size over the years. So it doesn't mean that this year it's a small conference. It's still going to be so many people from all around the world. But it is a context in which we operate. So I know some organizations who will not send like 5 people, but will send like 1 person, for example. And then, of course, because this is the first time that we host COP in our region, we need to make sure that we actually fit into those 40,000 people and that our civil society and the citizens of the EECCA countries are well represented. Maybe you have seen the question already at the bottom. I'm just curious if you already know. Are you coming to COP? You can say yes, maybe, or no in the chat while I will be finalizing my presentation. So I'm interested. You can put in the chat. If you're not sure, you can say maybe. Yeah. So if you're coming to COP, or if you're not coming to COP, or if you're not sure, please, and if you're okay to share, it's just to understand a bit the intentions. Yeah, thank you so much. You can, yeah, I see your answers. Maybe, yes, okay. Great. So whether you are coming or not coming, I hope that can be useful for you as well. We're historically, as you saw, we are very present during COP, but we also do other things during the year. So it's not the only thing that we prepare to. But what we do before COP is the climate policy overview that I mentioned, where we're collecting all of the main documents and policies prepared already by countries, and some of the suggestions that we have for making the climate policy better in the region. We are also reaching out to the delegations of our countries to plan some meetings and pass our messages from the civil society. We are collecting resources to actually bring the civil society and journalists to the conference and make sure that they use this opportunity. Doing capacity building sessions, this is one of them, but there will be some others as well for our members, and I think some open ones as well. And in general, we are in contact with our international colleagues because they are preparing for Azerbaijan as well, but they might not know a lot about the regional context, unfortunately. So it is also our role to open up the context of the region and the challenges that we have, but also the solutions and some good cases, and make sure that our region is like present on the global map, so to say. And then during COP, there's also meetings with delegations and some media, but there's everyday meetings between each other. So I think if you're coming to COP and you're not sure who could be your team, or you are not part of any civil society organization, I would suggest reaching out to us and meeting with us at least maybe like one time or a couple of times to exchange maybe what, I don't know, what interesting information we saw, how the negotiations are going. We can also help you to navigate inside this huge conference. So let us know. We're also going to be participating as speakers at different side events, panels, and following countries' positions every day to see where things are going. And then, of course, there will be some kind of overview that you could read on our website with our assessment of how the negotiations went, whether they were successful, and what to expect from next year. Okay, there's a link to our digest of news. If you're not subscribed yet, please do so. Our communicator, Alia, I think she was here at the webinar. She is preparing it every Monday and Tuesday. And if you subscribe today, you can still get the fresh one tomorrow, I think. It's available in English and in Russian. And you can go to our website to find this link as well. Now I will look at the chat because I think there was already a couple of questions. There was at least one that I saw about normal people, if the normal people can join. So if you're not part of any organization, as I was saying, you should be either then like a media person, so a blogger or something like that, or then you need to actually, okay, if you want to join the blue zone, the one that where the negotiations are happening, you should be a part of some organization, or at least be like connected to them so they can share with you their accreditation. So that's where actually this networking comes alone. But if you just want to learn something and you're just curious, you can go to the green zone. I didn't add this map, I'm sorry, but the green zone is the one that is available for everybody. So you maybe just required to register at the entrance or something like this, but you don't need to go through this whole process. So you can just come, and there will be also some panels. There will be also some kind of stands, informational stands, etc. So you can still participate and meet people. It will be probably a bit smaller than the main place, but still you can come if you're based in Baku. Let me start with probably the one that was repeated a couple of times is about a person not being part of any organization or not connected yet. I would say, first of all, I would ask you, if we were talking just two of us, I would ask, what is your interest then? Like, why do you want to be at the COP, and what do you think you can take from it? And if I would maybe answer instead of you and say that you want to get more involved into climate and you want to discover more information and understand how you can actually get involved and how you can help later, then I would suggest two things. One thing is actually going to this green zone that will be open for everybody. I would suggest it mostly to those who are already based in Azerbaijan. So traveling just to go to the green zone, I'm not sure if that's worth it, unless you, I don't know, you can afford it. But actually coming there, if you're based in Baku, if you're based in Azerbaijan, and just seeing like what kind of conversations are happening, that's one thing. And the other thing is actually to start getting connected to the organizations that are going to COP often. If you want to make a contribution, if you actually want to understand how it all works, not just this year, but for next years as well. There was a question about, and how can I get involved in between these meetings, in between COPs? Those are actually mostly for the delegations, so for the country representatives that are actually doing the negotiations. So we are observers. We can only see what they do, hear what they do, and then give our comments and feedbacks. But the negotiations are actually the responsibility of the delegations. So the meetings in between are mostly closed. There is one meeting that I think Gulshan was mentioning, which is a Bonn meeting, and it's always happening in Bonn. If COPs are always in different countries, this one in June, it's always in Bonn. And it is a more of a technical, it's like a small little COP kind of in a way, but it is more technical, and it is to prepare the delegations also for the decisions to be made in half a year. So in COP, whatever this COP might be. And Bonn is not for side events actually. So this is true. There's not that many panels, and it's not such a huge event like yeah, like a fair, you know, with all of these informational stands and stuff. So it's mostly for actually negotiations. Observers are also allowed there, but don't expect it to be this kind of show, big show, like during COP. And just maybe last one, what role of art, media, and storytelling? I can shortly answer that big role, because I think that art, media, and storytelling are shaping the views of the people, actually. So depending on how you use it, and if you know, this question actually disappeared somewhere, or maybe it was answered. But basically, I would suggest, again, to find what the civil society organizations are doing in the topic or the country where you are also based, the person who asked this question, because I mean, it's not going to influence the negotiations directly. But for example, if you remember this Fossil of the Day award that I mentioned, this kind of a funny show that happens at the end of the day to reveal which countries are blocking the negotiations, which countries are not actually bringing us the decisions that we need. This is art as well. So this is a performance that happens, and there's costumes, and there's like a little bit of fun after the hard day of serious discussions. But it also then goes to the media, and the delegations of the countries are actually paying attention if they are mentioned, and sometimes it actually changes the course of certain discussions. So definitely a huge role, but just depends on how you use it. And to use it well within COP, you need to understand how COP functions, and who, like the influential kind of the power balance, I wanted to say. So you need to understand which interventions to make, so they actually are influential. On the national level, on the local level, definitely art and media and storytelling are actually influencing people's minds. So that's very important. I will say again, so okay, there is no one registration link. So it's not like a webinar that you can just put your name and then you can come. Maybe a simpler registration then is for the green zone, and you should find this information on COP29 website. So official website of the presidency. I don't know, maybe while I'm speaking, someone can put the link in it, but it's easy to Google, like it's the official COP29.org maybe, or something like that. And they will put more information about what you can see at this green zone. So green zone is more for those who do not have the badge, the accreditation badge. Because going through if you want to register your organization, it takes 1 year, and it's a kind of a difficult process, because you need to upload a lot of your documents and confirmations about activities of your organization. If you're a media, as Alia mentioned, you have to have press badge, and actually send links of the articles that you wrote on related topics to climate change. So it is not like completely open to absolutely any person in the world. It still tries to make a focus on people who are working on climate-related topics. But as I was saying, the green zone might be a good solution in this case, or then getting a bit more active and connected to the civil society organizations that are going to COP, or well, becoming a media. It's not that easy, of course. But just I don't know what is your profession. So if you, in case you're a journalist and you've never thought that you could be like a separate play a separate role at COP, just you know that now you know that you can. I can answer the second one for sure because the delegations are formed by usually by the Ministry of Environment. And of course, they ideally they should also include other ministries. So as we know, it influences climate change, influences economic, health, energy is very tied. So all of those ministries, agriculture should be present, and the delegation is formed. Yeah, usually there's a department in the Ministry of Environment responsible for that. So in case you are somewhere in these circles, you can reach out to the Ministry of Environment and ask who is responsible for actually putting together a delegation, because I think for this there is still time. Usually the people can join before the very conference even. But you need to show your interest and also explain your role there. So what are you going to do there? How can you contribute? And the first question was about like joining as a volunteer. Again, to get to the COP, you need funding and you need the badge if you want to get into the negotiation spaces and like the where the main things are happening. So if you find funding opportunities, they are available. But there's no one place where I can just send you and say like, here's the money. But you can follow the different kind of grants for participating at COP. Usually they are for activists, for climate leaders, for someone who is doing like public work. I mean, like they are being public with the work that they're doing. Also journalists, etc. So I would suggest if you're already kind of aiming at the next year as well to follow different foundations and NGOs. Subscribe to our digest because we're definitely collecting those kind of opportunities, including for this year COP, but now it's less because it's very close. But for next year, we will be also seeing, if we're going to be seeing these opportunities, we will share. And then, of course, you need to understand if you're volunteering, then with which organization. Or, of course, I mean, you can get into the UN, but I don't know how. So you can try and get into this kind of help team during the conference, but that's not something I ever experienced. So I guess that's not something I could really help you with. Yeah.
Thanks, Ola. I mean, I think that's probably a good place to end. I mean, you've answered many questions. I think the presentation was really great, very useful today. Everyone should come back on Wednesday, and if they still have unanswered questions, they can post something on the webinar on Wednesday. And as I've already mentioned, we will share with everybody the recording and the links, so you have an opportunity to recap if you didn't get all of the information in one go.